Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another edition of Canada Talks. I'm your host, Bhagwan Singh, and I'm joined in the studio by my friend, colleague, and co-host, Martin Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Paji, as always, a pleasure. Back again.
We're back again. And so this afternoon, I get a text from Martin Singh, and it says, the topics that we're going to be discussing tonight. And I obviously left the paper at home.
Because we're always so very well prepared.
We're so well prepared. But I remember the title.
Yeah.
I do remember the title. And I thought, what is he on about? It's called greenwashing.
That's it.
So Paji, take us away on greenwashing.
So greenwashing is a huge topic, yeah? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to maybe take a bit of the time at the beginning of the show here to provide a number of different examples, talk about the different types, and then from there we'll take it on to things that might be, you know, more in the memory of our audience, yeah? Because we're going to pick out different corporate examples and that sort of thing. So greenwashing occurs when, I mean, it could be any organization really, but it's mostly focused on corporations and private industry when they make some type of an environmental claim, but it's not true in some way. And
give me an example.
Well, we're going to jump into examples in a bit, but what I want to do, I want to talk about the history of the term, because of course, like, you are not familiar with the term. I'm sure some of our viewers are not familiar with the term. Environmentalism has been, you know, around for decades and decades. How long has this been around? So the term was initially coined by an environmental activist named Jay Westerveld. And you might think that it would be around oil and gas or around nuclear power or something like that, something that was happening in the decades ago, like around the time when you and I were born, yeah? But that's actually not what it was. It actually happened as a result of a visit that he did down in the South Pacific. It was either Fiji or Samoa, I forget which one, and it had to do with reusing your towels to try to help save the environment. And he knew just from his own studies and that sort of thing that reusing the towels in that particular environment, how they had it set up, was really absolutely doing nothing. And so he came back and wrote a thesis on it, and this was back in 1986. That thesis was picked up by a friend of his who was running a magazine out of the city of New York, and pow, the term greenwashing was born.
So he's the inventor.
You can say, yeah. And what it is that, I mean, some years later, it was picked up by Oxford English. I think it was 1999, but it was in very active use all that time. And
so just recall here, just instant recall for my benefit as well as our viewers. Greenwashing means when someone makes a claim about the environment, but it's not actually true.
Well, there's all kinds of things. So what happens is, we'll start with those people who at first we believe are genuine. Meaning you have people within a corporation, could be the CEO or someone like that, and he or she is genuinely interested in trying to align their company with sustainable goals, be it zero carbon or net zero carbon, or be it just, you know, reducing plastic waste or whatever the case may be, because like greenhouse gases get a lot of the talk these days, but and it's important certainly, but it's not the only environmental issue. And then they don't succeed in reaching their goals for whatever reason. Some people may say that that's greenwashing, but that in itself also may not be, because they might be trying to make a genuine effort. However,
so is it the claim that we're going to achieve this?
So we're gonna. There's all kinds of things that go on here. So first of all, we're going to talk about two main types of greenwashing. Yeah. So the first main type is what we call selective disclosure. This is where a company releases information that is positive for their environmental credentials and selectively does not release information that is negative for their environmental credentials. Okay, so that's the first main type, and there's all kinds of crew that do that.
So let me just rewind that, and just from my understanding, in maybe our viewers as well, that they're just selective in what they release. That shows them in a favorable light, and then don't release the stuff that's not so great.
Exactly it.
That's part that is termed under greenwashing.
It is one of the types. Right. So then you have another type, what they call is decoupling. Which and decoupling occurs in a number of different cases, but one example is where they come forward and they make claims about their own environmentalism, but there is no action actually done behind it. So people are, I guess, talking the talk but not walking the walk, and that's why those two actions, they say, that's why they call it decoupling, because there's a distance between them. Yeah.
So as an analogy, some of the corporations actually say we care about our staff, right?
Yes.
When they don't, and
that's it.
And that comes to play whenever unions try to negotiate pay increase.
That's it. So that would be called an example of decoupling. After we investigate these two main types of greenwashing, what happens then is that you have a further splitting of the discussion. Some of it's on what we call product, some of it's on executive. And then on the product side, what happens is that you can have three different types as it is. So for example, let's say, Pudgy, you had a kind of plastic bag that you use for bringing the groceries home, yeah? Sure. And I come up and I say, use our bag instead, because our bag is recyclable.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
So that is a product claim. Meaning that I am saying that to use my product over yours because my product is better for the environment.
Sure.
Yeah?
Get it.
So then we can have a process claim. Your plastic bag and my plastic bag are the exact same, but I make my plastic bag and produce 20 megatons of less of carbon dioxide in a year from my factory. You follow where I'm going with that?
Right.
So product is the exact same, but mine's a process claim in this regard.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
And then like, we don't need to dig it down into super amount of details, but then if we switch from product to, say, what we call the executive side of greenwashing, a company might come out and say, all right, we're going to take 10% of all of our revenue post-tax, and we're going to invest it into green initiatives to get ourselves to net zero. So it has nothing to do with their services, nothing to do with their products. It's them at a company level taking some action in order to be able to say we're doing good for the environment.
So just repeat that one again on the executive. I get the product piece.
Yeah.
The product is plastic bags, mine and yours.
Yep.
Mine says, okay, you know what? Mine's environmentally friendly and yours is not.
Yeah.
And the other piece is my product is my bag.
Yeah.
Is less harmful to the environment than your bag, even though it's the same thing, right? That's that piece.
Yeah.
The executives, say that again.
All right. So say, for example, let's say you and I are running a company, yeah?
Yeah.
And in that company, we're using a certain amount of electricity. And that electricity currently would be provided by, the various electricity providers that we have here in the province of Ontario. And you and I, we have a good year, right? Because you help take care of the employees, right? And I manage the finances, yeah?
Right.
And so what it is that as a result of that good work, we have an amount of money left over after corporate and personal taxes, and we take it and we reinvest into the business. And what we do, we take the whole roof of our building, yeah, and we put it all with solar panels.
Right.
And as a result of that, we're using more renewable energy and we're drawing less from the polluting utilities that we have in the province. It has nothing to do with product. It has nothing to do with the service. Right? It has nothing to do with how we make our product. It's how we run our company directly. Right. Yeah? And so that would be a claim on that side, right? So you could have a crew that comes out and says, well, what we're doing is we are using less plastic, for example. And we're using less plastic because we're going to all paper bags, or we're not using any more paper. Because what's happening is that we're going entirely electronic, so it's all electronic documents or whatever the case may be.
Right.
These are things done internally within the company in order to be able to make things go well.
Right. So how does this impact? I mean, so greenwashing is manipulation. Is that a good word? I don't know if that's the right word, but it's claims that are not quite. It's selective to say the least.
Well, it could be straight up false. In fact, and it runs the whole piece, right? So we have the ones that I mentioned earlier, which is where CEO, he or she, is genuinely interested in trying to make something happen, but doesn't make it go, right, for whatever reason, and then all the way to actually straight out lies, and so we'll talk about a straight out lie. So Volkswagen, with their emissions on their vehicles, it was huge news. So Volkswagen came out and they said, buy our vehicles because they emit, far less pollutants than all the other vehicles out on the market. So I believe that this was, pre-electric car time and that sort of thing. And so in that particular case, it was a product claim, meaning it's their vehicle, and they're saying their vehicle's better than other vehicles. Why? Less pollution created.
Right.
And what was happening though is that the crew there at Volkswagen fixed up their vehicles such that whenever they sensed that they were being put through an emissions test, they would run differently in order to create less pollution coming out of them. Like, it was absolute filth. So so you can understand where I'm going with that. Like, that's, on the very darkest of dark lies, right? Like
Volkswagen done this.
Yeah.
And so just take me through that piece. Volkswagen done this. They just tinkered with their electronics or mechanics.
Yeah.
So that every time.
Purposefully, subverting the emissions measurement system, really.
So then this came out. How did this come out? And
so it came out in the media, and there was a huge hullabaloo about it, as you can imagine, right? Like, it just was not well received at all. I believe that there were class action lawsuits that went on with it and that sort of thing. I don't really know if they suffered any penalties per se, because we can talk about penalties here in a bit, because there are groups that have suffered penalties, even here in Canada, for false advertising and that sort of thing. And we'll get into those examples of how important the regulatory bodies are and that sort of thing. But Volkswagen took a kick in the chops on that one, and rightfully so. And it's a clear example, like, of things not being done properly.
Wow, that's huge. You're going to mention about other examples or other...
Exactly. So I mean, we mentioned the Volkswagen example, but there are many, right? There are many. And in fact, cases of greenwashing predate the actual term of greenwashing. So, for example, if we look back into the 1960s, when there was the development of the nuclear power industry, and, there were claims that it was clean power. Well, I mean, I guess you could say that there are cleaner or fewer emissions than coal-fired power plants. Like, that's certainly true, right? And that's type of greenwashing also too, right? Telling the truth with the intention to deceive, right? Meaning that you lace your claims with a bunch of facts in order to try to make it sound real, yeah. But then, of course, we know that there's all kinds of problems with, nuclear waste. Not to mention meltdowns that, have happened, fortunately not here in Canada, but for other communities, they've had challenges in that regard. So what it is that the next big one that they talk about that happened very, very early on, and that was high profile, was Chevron. And what happened with that company?
Chevron's the gas company.
Yeah, you got it.
Company.
Yeah, petrol company. And so what it was with that crew, they were going out and they were profiling all the great things that their employees were doing, and that sort of thing. And so you had a bunch of environmental activists that came out and said, wait a second, no doubt you have a couple employees over here that are running, a butterfly conservatory. And what they did, they priced it out. Now, this would be in like late 1980, early 1990 dollars. Yeah, so it'd be more expensive now. But they said, okay, this butterfly conservatory costs you $5,000, say, a year to run. But the advertising that you put, dollars that you put into telling everybody that your employees are doing this particular butterfly conservatory runs into the millions of dollars. So what's the actual motivation here? Yeah. And that, of course, would be an example of executive branch, right? Because running a butterfly conservatory has nothing to do with, the process of creating the fuel, like the distillation process, or the fuel itself. It's what they are doing as a company in order to, improve their environmental image.
You had mentioned just a few minutes ago, we're about roughly halfway through the show, but is that Canada that has had some of its has had greenwashing, and there has been fines associated with it.
Absolutely.
What's happened there?
Okay, so even before we get into that, and we will come back to that, why greenwash? It's an important question, right? Why would you have companies go out of their way and take the risk of saying they're going to, do something when they clearly either don't do it or have no plans to do it, or in fact are doing the very opposite? And so And so the reason why they do it is that it very much has the opportunity to positively impact the bottom line. Mm-hmm. When you look at the statistics of surveys that get done, a fairly sizable percentage of the population across the political spectrum has an understanding of what different companies do. And a majority of the population generally, and I'm speaking North American population at this point, is actually, or at least they state that they're willing to pay more money for products that are more environmentally friendly.
But it also works in the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind about wanting to buy something that's being produced right.
Yeah, for sure that. And there's different kinds of arguments that people have around this, right? Like you have the environmental argument, which I just gave, and then you'd have what people would call the moral argument, which you just gave, right? Like it's the right thing to do, so this is what I should do, and I'm willing to spend more money to do the thing that's right for society, as opposed to not.
Or even if you don't spend more money, you're more likely to buy that product that makes that claim.
Yeah, that's exactly it too, right? So, but I mean, like both of those cases work, but I say that if folks are willing to put money behind their belief system, then that pushes consumer indexes and that sort of thing.
So coming back to now, so why greenwash? I mean, it affects the bottom line, which is key.
100%.
You said about cases in Canada.
Yeah.
Where things have gone wrong.
That's it. So what it is, one of the more recent ones right now is with RBC. So the Royal Bank of Canada is actually had, like, it was actually very, very visible. It was in the national news. There's a crew that's being led. I think she's the Secretary Treasurer of the BC First Nations or something like that, or maybe it could be for all of Canada, the activist group. And what it is, she and I think it's Eco Justice, which is the nonprofit law group that's working with her, and they've filed complaints with the federal government for RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada. And what they're saying is that RBC is straight up lying about their claims. So the banks in Canada, RBC among them, have made the claim that they're working to be in line with the Paris Agreement to become net zero by XYZ date. However, RBC and a number of other banks, in fact, many, continue to finance to the tunes of billions of dollars oil and gas projects.
Right.
Well, they're sucking and blowing, right? Now, of course, they deny the allegations. They say that it takes a substantial amount of time to make the switch and that sort of thing. But the environmental activists are saying this is a type of greenwashing as well, meaning that your timelines are ambiguous. Your actual game plan that's going forward is either not being achieved or it's ambiguous in its own self in terms of the goals that are being set. And so they're saying it's just not realistic. And so what it is that they are going and they're saying that not legitimate and they should be fined and penalized. And I know you want me to get to the company that actually got penalized, and for the life of me, I turned 50 this week, so maybe the old brain's not working as well as it should be, and I forget it. However,
you're still a young man.
That's it. However, I can tell you that the fine was $4 million, which is not chump change for RBC, I guess it would be.
It would be,
but still, shareholders will take notice of that, and it's not appropriate. But what they're doing also, different regulators, and this is an example from our good friends in the United Kingdom across the pond, HSBC, the bank, was making false claims about their environmentalism. Instead of fining them, the British regulator just cut them right off. And they said, you can't do that, use that advertisement. And so they stripped out all the advertising. So I think you guys have different words for it in the UK, but we would call it bus stops and subway stops and stuff like that here in Canada, and that sort of thing. Underground,
bus stop.
But it'd be the underground, I guess you would call it there.
In London,
and so what they did is that they said that you guys are simply not allowed to make those advertisements anymore.
So this is just a false advertisement. You can't. I mean, HSBC is huge. I mean, they advertise normally anyway.
Yeah.
But that particular claim, they stopped them, and did they fine them or just?
I couldn't find evidence of a fine. The only regulatory action that I could see is that there were two separate advertisements that they had going on, and both of them got straight up chopped.
Wow. So Now, there's a whole environmental movement, right, around this particular issue. Where is that going? What's happening? I mean, are companies now thinking, oh my God, like that's, I mean, coming back to the bottom line, let's fall in line here, right? And how much regulation is done over the companies?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not so sure companies have learned the lesson yet, to be frank. You find different numbers from like very legitimate resources. But one of the numbers that I saw, and this is from a European crew, they said that fully 42 to 45% of all claims are either, purposely false or, deceptive in terms of the selective information piece, the selective disclosure piece that I mentioned earlier. Like, that's huge, right? So you have 50% of all claims that are just trash and garbage right from the get-go. And what happens, Paji, is that this leads to something called green skepticism. So your consumer now has huge difficulty in believing any green claims, which is actually a serious problem for those companies that are actually doing solid work. Because now the ability for them to get picked up and supported by those consumers who want to back proper environmental products being made in an environmental way are having significantly more difficulty. Now, I want to jump back to the point that you had made, though, about maybe companies are falling in line. There is now a solid understanding that there can be a price to pay. Yeah. So what it is that for those companies that do get smacked with accusations of greenwashing in a public way, they generally, on average, have a drop of 1.34% on the American Consumer Satisfaction Index. Now, you're probably sitting back to you saying, 1.34%? That sounds like a fart in the wind, right? Like, it sounds like damn near nothing. It's not. 1.34% on that ACSI is absolutely huge. Huge. Much smaller units of like either increase or decrease on that particular index have direct bearing of like return on investment and stock market price and everything. And so companies do pay very close attention to that. The unfortunate thing is that consumers will not always universally apply the penalty. So what do I mean by that? If, for example, you and I are neutral towards a company, but we are buying their product, and then we come to learn about a greenwashing accusation, there will be a 1.34 on average % drop in our satisfaction index with that company. And that's a significant amount. By contrast though, Baji, if we really like that company's products or services, and we've used them for an extended period of time, and we have a very high opinion of that particular company prior to the greenwashing allegation, the drop is very, very small. This drop is measurable, but it's not considered scientifically significant, meaning that the amount of error drop, or rather the amount of satisfaction drop, is within the boundaries that the measurement could be just due to error. You follow where I'm going with that?
Well, you literally got 2-3 minutes left, and literally two more, like two.
Yeah.
Is it making the political agenda? I mean, we can talk about Canada for a start. Is this issue greenwashing? Now that you explained it to myself and the viewers as well, how much is it on the radar of political parties?
It comes and goes. Right now, like COP27 is around us. I don't know when the show's going to get broadcast, but it's in this time period. There's huge press coming out of that. Oh, COP27, sorry, Pudgy. That's the United Nations annual convention on climate change. Right. Currently being held in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. And so what it is that folks are participating. Some folks tried not to, like your guys' new prime minister in the UK, Rishi Sunak, I think his name is. So he tried to get out of it. Now he's come back. But what it is also too is that I wouldn't say it's a new approach, but an approach that's getting a lot more exposure, and it's almost kind of calling out the greenwashing of the industrial nations, insofar as developing nations, particularly African nations, are saying, we're bearing the brunt of climate change, but we haven't caused this problem. So you guys should be giving us money to help compensate our transition to a green economy, because you guys are already industrialized. And money is actually starting to flow. So there was a loan that came from, I believe it was France, Germany, and maybe a couple of the other partners in that particular group to South Africa in the amount of a 600 million euro loan, so not small money, to help them transition. I believe in that case it's the transition away from coal-fired power plants or something like that. So, so it is for a lot of people, front burner, as it were, top of mind. But I think that there's probably still a long way to go yet, because the term greenwashing isn't front and center for a lot of people. No,
it's interesting. I mean, we think about in a way, the environmental sort of struggle, what I call it, is come a long way from tree huggers.
Sure.
Right.
So-called,
So-called tree huggers to where we're talking the United Nations looking at this in terms of money flowing. So it does say a lot. But imagine, and I actually think maybe his last comment is this whole system, right? This economic system that we have, right? I mean, what damage it does to the environment, where it's based on as you stated right at the top of the show, the bottom line.
Well, and just to touch on that before we go, I mean, it's almost a sense of deja vu for me. Like the start of the environmental movement, at least as far as I see it, and this is not definitive, is with the book Silent Spring, which was written, and I forget her name now, which is absolutely terrible, but it was written by a biologist out of the United States, and it talked about, among other things, the disappearance of all the songbirds and that sort of thing in North America as a result of pollution, and then we had DDT and all the other things that killed off a bunch of other birds. We're seeing almost a repeat of this right now with the droughts that are happening in Africa due to climate change, killing off all the elephants and the giraffes and everything else. And so these issues are not going away, and I am forever hopeful that the general public picks up on it more and is able to direct those companies to act in a more environmentally sustainable fashion.
On that very important point, our time is up this week, Bajis, and so needless to say, we just wish our viewers a wonderful week.
Absolutely.
And until next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.